some people are going to find this quite hard to take, but I actually had a real kind of moment where I learnt some truths about George Bush. I think it was shortly after he finished in his presidency, and I started to view the tapes that I'd watched previously with anger and would spit bricks at the TV at how could this ignoramus be paraded before us as the most powerful man on the planet, and yada yada this and yada yada that. And once I found out the truth about that poor man's victimisation at the hands of Cheney and his dad, I looked into that man's eyes and suddenly I saw a scared child. Yeah. And I suddenly felt this huge wave of sympathy rise up within me about this man that I had previously believed to be nothing more than a monster.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Seeing the pain in the victim, in other words, the guy who's also the abuser.
The criminal, yeah.
The criminal. So
seeing the victim in the criminal.
Exactly. Yeah. It's an old...
For me, I also see it in the Cabbage Patch Twins, in Cameron and Clegg.
Yeah. Because
I know that both of those are public school boys. I certainly have no knowledge of such, but I would be very, very surprised if they had made it through the public school system for the elite without having been either victim to or perpetrator of paedophilia amongst their
I was going to ask you actually what you thought about the idea of paedophilia, because I know there's a lot of kind of like, it's a big emotional subject, isn't it?
It's a taboo subject.
It's one that it kind of raises a lot of, there's some really genuine people. Well, it's much easier if you think, and less complicated, and there's all these ideas.
Yeah, well, this
all
is
these ideas of implanting kind of technology into your brain that kind of controls you. What simpler method is there to completely fuck your mind?
Well, no, this is the point. This is really okay. We're really getting to the crunch here. All right, the issue that we've come across, and this is fact, people. This isn't some woo-woo nonsense that I've been fucking stumbling across in YouTube channels. This is personal, in-depth experience. So don't even think about doubting this. All right, childhood abuse, especially sexual, but violence, anything between the ages of about 5 and about 14, instigate something called DID. It's dissociative disorder, and basically it's where the ego will separate at the point of abuse, where the child won't be able to whether the child will not be able to sustain the abuse, and so their ego literally will leave the mind, and the mind that is left behind forms a new ego, and it assumes a character of some sort of strong something that's some characteristic that's seen as strong by the victim. So quite often, if it's a young girl being abused, they'll assume the character of a young boy, because they see boys as being strong and being tough and being able to stand it. So the natural ego will leave the body, and this tough little boy will enter the body, who will then sustain the abuse for the natural ego, only to then relieve the body, to resign from the body, and to allow the natural ego to re-enter at the end of the abuse. And what programs like MK Ultra have made of this is that if they apply abuse in a systematic way, in particular environments, in particular scenarios, that they can use those scenarios in very subtle, subconscious ways to be able to re-engage this alter ego. So say they empattern this alter ego with a particular set of books on a bookshelf, they don't need to recreate the entire room to switch that alter ego back on. All they need to do is put that particular row of books on a bookshelf in their hotel room, and book them into that room, and they are guaranteed of having that alter ego in the room.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Now they can work on that alter ego in that state, and the natural ego will be completely unaware of anything that has happened to their alter ego. They may have dim memories of having not quite felt themselves, not quite known where they've been, bit of a gap in their memory, something not quite feeling right, but other than that they'll have no idea as to what's been happened to them. And this is how Manchurian candidates are programmed. This is how their programmed assassins are done, usually with passages from books. I know Catcher in the Rye was used largely by MK Ultra, which is why you see that coming up time and time again in the lone assassin, the lone nut theory, always seems to have this fixation with the Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
I think in the case of one of them, it was actually in the case of one of the famous ones, it was possibly actually the possession of the book that was his safety catch, and that the removal of the book meant the instigation of the program. So all they had to do was simply go into his flat and steal the book and prevent him from being able to get another copy to switch him into programming.
You can understand why, in a way, they've illegalised psychedelic drugs in a way, because beginning to understand the kind of language that you kind of move into and what you see and what you kind of understand by human psychology would, if it had been something that we would have researched and developed from the time it began in the way we would have hoped, you'd have been able to see and understand what was happening. You know, the language of that kind of programming, it is horrific in a way. If we don't know what's happening, you haven't got a hell in chance of kind of being able to deal with the problems that you've got from it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, being ignorant of these systems would lead one to believe that there were so many monsters and villains lurking in every street and every estate, from the way that this is presented to us, and yet the understanding that predators are being created for the purpose of mind control, for the purpose of puppeteering by a banking elite, by a rich elite, and that the only way that you get to a position of power is through one of their channels, where they are able to program you all the way up. Cameron and bloody and Clegg, those poor fuckers have been in this since I was 7.
Yeah.
What unimaginable monstrosities have been done to those men?
If we really understood the language of what am I thinking? That kind of programming, that hypnosis, that
and this is
that pure fucking fear.
And if you accept that this is true, and that this is one of my points that I'm constantly repeating, is that if this abuse is encouraged and fostered, and that if the sexual predilection can be directed towards that of liking to have sex with children or liking to abuse children in some way or another, and that becomes the natural, or not the natural, but the programmed sexual response of an individual in authority, then you immediately have a perfect control system. Absolutely. Whereby you have a perfect carrot and stick for every eventuality.
So you're suggesting that it's rife?
I'm suggesting that it is the fundamental system of control throughout the entire pyramid of control. And not only that,
it's paedophilic in nature.
It's paedophilic in nature, because that is the only taboo that you will never get anybody to whistleblow on.
Exactly. Yeah.
They are never going to come out and say yes.
I can imagine quite a few people,
and especially if this sexual predilection is able to be switched on, which I suspect it is under certain situations, under certain pressures. That once this sexual predilection has been turned on, and we now have a predatory paedophile who then goes on into adulthood to still wanting to have sex with children. Well, children are only children for a very short time. So even if they only have a predilection for one child at a time, they are going to need numerous victims throughout their adult sexual life. Okay? What happens to those victims? If they are controllable, they're absorbed into the system. They go on to become the lower layer of shiny ones. They go on to become the TV faces, the rock and roll stars, the people who get a nice life but no real power.
So
and the ones that don't absorb the programming, they get dumped out on society. So all of our criminals and villains and the things that we think that we need the police force to defend us from are actually being generated by the very bloody elite that the police force is actually protecting from us.
Yeah.
Because if we knew what these guys were up to, we would tear them limb from limb. Some of the things that I know about, I won't even repeat in public.
So would you? So you said earlier you kind of like.
And you know the sort of things that I'll speak about. So you know the sort of unimaginable things that I have in my head that I know with reasonable certitude happened and are probably still happening and are being goddamn paid for as a service.
And on a scale we have no. It's not just thing that is worldwide, isn't it?
It is planet. It is endemic. Everywhere that the British
religious.
Everywhere that the law of the sea, basically, that the larger Roman Empire has been exported to. This appears to be the...
So taking what you've just said, I mean, that's kind of like, I should imagine, a lot of people find that, we have the conspiracy theorists, if you start off with 9/11 and start questioning that, if you're kind of not, if you can't go there, then getting to this getting to this one is...
Well, okay, I can give you numerous examples. Okay, trousers down for the sixth formers. Biggest bloody joke all my entire school life as a commoner in a bloody comprehensive school. Yeah. Everybody used to make a joke out of the fact that a sixth former at a public school was most likely shagging the fourth formers or the first formers. Went without saying. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that.
Yeah. So it was known. It wasn't just known amongst the people who were doing it.
Yeah,
it was tacitly understood. Yeah. Okay? Same with the priesthood. Yeah? I remember there being a joke in Monty Python in 1971 where they said something about grafting a priest to a pederast. And I went off and looked up pederast, and it's somebody who commits buggery, which was the joke. But again, there was the joke. The joke was that priests were commonly associated with buggery, and especially associated with buggery of small boys in the choir boy system. So you have an entire church that is established with a system of predatory paedophilia endemic within its very establishment. It's impossible.
That's why they're called altar boys.
Well, yeah, tell me about it, yeah.
You started off by saying that you looked into the eyes of George Bush and felt what he'd been through.
Well, to some degree, had some understanding.
Do you think there's a reconciliation process for all this, for all these?
I think there has to be a degree of amnesty. If we're ever to move forward from any of this point.
Reconciliation.
Yeah, reconciliation. So, yeah, again...
It's a big one, isn't it? Because I don't think many people would... That's one thing that I think that... we're so indoctrinated with this idea of punishment.
Now what if you have mistreated a group of your peers and you now have to step onto that stage to explain your actions?
Absolutely, Jay.
And they are not there to support your bloody performance. They are there to hear your reparations and just exactly what you're going to do about it.
That's enough punishment, right?
I would suggest that there's very few amongst us that would be of stern enough stuff to be able to repeat that on any bloody regular basis without reforming ourselves in a manner that we would be happy to accept that.
I think initially the abuser who's up in court, also cold as hell, not able, just cold and kind of distant from
I mean, there is also, the issue of paedophilia is that would appear to be incurable. Now, I actually very much doubt that that's actually true. I believe that there just simply hasn't been enough mind invested in the right direction.
Anyone can be cured of it.
In the understanding, certainly under the current model there is no supposed cure for paedophilia. So without the possible things like voluntary chemical castration, I know that there are certain paedophiles that have even called for physical castration on themselves and been refused. But certainly without, the likes of voluntary castration, we do certainly get into some very muddy areas of law and penal servitude, which are very difficult to avoid. And it's very difficult to find a common law way of preventing somebody's sexual predilection for children, in the knowledge that predilection will instill sexual violence in its pursuit, and that the result of that sexual violence will be another cracked mind and another handful of trouble on the hands of the community because of somebody's sexual
I think, as we said before, I
preferences.
think the present system is self-perpetuating, so that you're never going to get any breakthroughs with the system as it is, and people kind of confessing to or admitting to what they've done. But as we know,
we act in an unsocial or antisocial way because we are misdirected.